Hello and welcome to The Language of Anger, a webinar by Space Hertfordshire exploring anger, conflicts and resolutions. My name is Chris Russell and I will be delivering this session. So firstly, what is anger? Well, anger is a perfectly normal emotion, but it's one of the ones that's tricky to manage. Anger compels us to act, it compels us to do something, usually, whereas things like happiness, feeling content, feeling cared for, generally don't compel us to act upon something. Anger is a very strong emotion that can, really force us to act upon it and do something. Now, by the time our children get to school age, as parents, carers, we often think that these angry outbursts should be a thing of the past. You think of them as, toddler tantrums. They should know better by now that they're at school. However, the ability to master anger and frustration is a skill that is still developing into your early to mid 20s when your brain fully matures, around 25. So that's one reason why anger issues in children, teenagers, and young people are common, because the brain is still developing and is not yet reaching that full adult maturity. Now, everyone has angry feelings. Feeling angry is a normal reaction for when things go wrong, for when life feels unfair, when we get overwhelmed, if people upset or hurt us. It's normal to feel angry. It'd be quite healthy to feel angry about things. Anger can sometimes act as a positive force for change. It can compel us to do something to change the situation that has made us angry, or it can be negative and destructive if not channeled in the right place. So, is anger bad? Well, no, anger is not bad because it's a normal human emotion. Anger tends to be a secondary emotion that follows on from other feelings, in many cases, anxiety. Anxiety is often the root cause of anger. Something can make you feel anxious and unsettled. And as a result of feeling unsettled, you get quite angry with those around you. Often children learn that the angry children are the bad ones because they're the ones that get the consequences at school. All the angry children are the ones that have to sit and miss their break time. All the angry children are the ones that get sent to the head's office. And this influences beliefs that anger is a bad thing or an abnormal reaction, something you shouldn't have. It reinforces that it's uncontrollable. It reinforces that it's always linked to aggression and trouble, but it's not. Now, when exploring neurodiversity and anger, regulating your emotions, your emotional regulation, is one of your brain's executive functions. So, executive functions are some of your brain's main activities throughout the day. It's organizing yourself, it's controlling your emotional responses, it's planning what you're going to do as your executive functions. And regulating your emotions, regulating your anger is one of those main functions of the brain. A majority of neurodiverse children and young people will have support needs relating to their executive functioning. Your emotions are initiated in your amygdala. It's where the fight or flight response is produced in the brain. And those emotions that are initiated are then controlled by your frontal lobe, where they're regulated. Autistic teenagers are reported to have accelerated growth of larger amygdala. And ADHDers have a difference in the brain activity in the frontal lobe, both affecting emotional responses. Therefore, controlling those emotional responses or controlling that anger may be more difficult in neurodivergent children and young people due to the fact that they're neurodiverse. So, controlling emotional responses is sometimes referred to anger management or emotional regulation. So, those are the two terms that I'm going to be using moving forward: emotional regulation, anger management. So, emotional regulation refers to the process of recognizing what emotion you have, when you have them, recognizing how you experience them, and recognizing how to express those feelings. Your emotional regulation, so how you respond to those emotional impulses, it can be automatic or it can be controlled. So it can be conscious emotional regulation or unconscious emotional regulation. So if it's automatic, your automatic emotional regulation is someone says something you disagree with in a work meeting, you ignore it, you don't really say anything to it, you haven't really thought about that comment, you brush it off without really thinking about it. It's automatic. Controlled emotional regulation. Someone cuts me up on the roundabout and I'm actively deciding against beeping my horn and shouting at them. I feel very angry about being cut up on the roundabout, but I'm actively controlling what I'm going to do, how I'm going to respond to that. Another way that one can respond automatically to emotional regulation, someone might cut you up on a roundabout, and before you've thought about it, you are beeping the horn and swearing. You didn't plan to do it. It was automatic. That's just what my body did. Two different types, conscious and unconscious, automatic and controlled. But your emotional regulation, your anger management, can also depend on the environment that you're in. So your emotional regulation in a library is typically going to be very different to when you are watching the Euros in the pub. If you get some good news in the library, you're very unlikely to stand on a table, throw your drink, and cheer at the top of your lungs due to the environment around you. Now, some neurodivergent children and young people may express having big feelings, and they may convey themselves in a very outward way. For example, if you felt a sense of injustice in the classroom, they may seemingly overreact or not really be managing their anger, getting too angry about something quite small. But this is an example of that emotional regulation difficulties in neurodivergent children and why it can be difficult to manage because I'm feeling just as strong no matter the environment. The environment isn't affecting how I feel in that moment. So anxiety levels usually contribute to your ability to manage your emotions. So the more anxious you are, the more difficult it is to manage your emotions. And if anger is a secondary emotion to anxiety, it's one of the emotions that's harder to manage or harder to regulate. So if you are at this constant alert stage due to heightened anxiety levels, it can take very little to push someone into a meltdown or a shutdown. Neurodivergent children and young people tend to have increased social anxiety, and their ability to manage can be hampered by the difficulties with emotional regulation and difficulties with emotional literacy. The anger cycle. So what is the anger cycle? Well, something happens to your child. Something happens. It's an instigator. It makes your child feel angry, which creates these angry feelings. When you experience these angry feelings, they then cause the angry behavior. The angry behavior creates an angry environment. And being in that angry environment reinforces the angry feelings, which in turn causes angry behavior, which in turn creates an angry environment. And it becomes that anger cycle. And it can be really difficult to break that cycle, manage that anger, regulate that emotion, and exit out of that anger cycle. Anger is a form of communication. We've already said it's a normal part of being a human being. It's a normal emotion to experience. It's quite cyclical. You can get stuck in that cycle of anger. And while you're angry, you may shout. Your child may refuse to do what they're told. Defiance. They may say some hurtful things to try and upset others, create that angry environment, break or smash things, hit or hurt parents or other family members or friends. But if we see that anger, that behavior as the tip of the iceberg, instead of punishing the angry behavior, we take a step back and look to unpick it. I mean, if my child is angry, I see this like a warning light on a dashboard of a car. The anger itself is the message. The angry behavior is that message. and there is something wrong under the bonnet that I need to fix to turn that light off. My child isn't angry for no reason, so where has this come from? How can I reduce this? How can I unpick it? And how can I interpret what they are trying to communicate? Well, one way of doing this is using the A-B-C method. A is the antecedent, B, the behavior, and C, the consequence. So using this method, the ABC, you don't need anything formal. You can do this on the back of a postcard, on the back of an envelope, on a notes app on your phone. It doesn't require anything fancy, any fancy technology. Always start with B, the behavior. Objectively, what you see, the behavior. Then take a step back to the antecedent. So before I saw this difficult or dangerous or angry behavior, what was the antecedent? What preceded that? What happened beforehand? And after that, what was the consequence of that behavior? And using this method, we can start to unpick that anger as communication. What does it mean and how do we resolve this? We're going to look at a case study now. Here we have Lucy. Lucy is at school. Lucy swears at her teacher. She stands up, she tips over her chair, she knocks her book to the floor, and sits outside the classroom at the top of the stairs whenever asked to begin handwriting. Lucy's escorted from the stairs to the office by a member of the administration team. So that's our case study. It's a short paragraph on Lucy at school. What I'd like you to do is to pause this webinar and using the ABC method, unpick what was the behavior that we are unpicking? What is the reason for this? What is Lucy, or how is Lucy communicating? Look at the antecedent, what happened before, and the consequence, what happened afterwards, and see what questions you have. Unpause this when you are ready. So hopefully you've had some time to think about the A, B, C of Lucy in this environment. It's always easiest to start with B, the behavior. Now, looking at this purely objectively, not putting any of my own emotion into this, I can say from this case study that the behavior that caused us to unpick Lucy's situation is she swears at a teacher. She stands up in the middle of a classroom and tips her chair over, and she knocks one book to the floor. She sits outside the classroom and stays at the top of the stairs. I'm not saying Lucy was rude. I'm not saying Lucy trashed the classroom, because those are quite subjective. What is rude to one person may not be rude to another. Trashing a classroom may look different from one person to another as well. It's not helpful to use that emotive language when we're unpicking anger, but using that objective language of exactly what happened helps us to unpick it. So that's the behavior. Taking a step back, this seems to happen whenever Lucy is asked to begin handwriting. And the consequence of that behavior, after that behavior, she is escorted by a member of the admin team down the stairs to the administration office. Now, hopefully you have some questions that you would ask Lucy's support network, because I certainly would off the back of that. I have lots of questions about the antecedent to what happened before. What I'd like to know is, how is Lucy being asked to start handwriting? When is Lucy being asked to start handwriting? How is handwriting being taught? Is this a cover teacher that only teaches handwriting? Does this teacher make everyone put their hand up when they've finished handwriting? And Lucy's always the last one. So feels very anxious about being the last one, causing that secondary feeling of anger. So being asked to begin handwriting induces that I'm going to be the last one with my hand up in the air. I'm not going to do it. Does Lucy have an undiagnosed or unrecognized specific learning difficulty? Does she have dysgraphia? Is she dyslexic? Is it the time of day that Lucy's being asked to do handwriting? Is it always 2 p.m.? Does Lucy need a movement break at that time or a sensory break? Is Lucy doing this to be escorted to the administration team? Does she get a bit of informal mentoring from the person from the office team, that administration team member? Does she have quite a good relationship with that person and needs a bit of mentoring at school? So is she feeling like she needs some guidance? There are so many questions to ask about both the antecedent and the consequence. But I wonder how many of you asked exactly which swear word she used, or how far away her chair landed from her table. It's not particularly helpful to dwell on the behaviour, even though that can have the biggest emotional impact on us as parent carers. But looking at the antecedent, what happened before the angry behaviour, and the consequence afterwards, gives us loads of questions to explore and unpick that anger. So thinking about anger or dysregulation, you can think of it like a bell curve. We start at 0 at the bottom and everything is fine. A person is okay. There is a trigger. There is something that causes an emotional reaction, and that anger starts to escalate. It escalates until it reaches the peak of the bell curve. And that is usually the point where those difficult behaviours come out. That's the bit that we see at the top of that bell curve. There is then a period of emotional recovery where we slowly come back down and back to 0. If we're trying to support someone going through that bell curve of anger, it's highly unlikely that after a trigger and an escalation, we get to a peak, and then they're suddenly ready to talk about what happened and make it better again. Almost everyone needs a period of emotional recovery, and it can be a lot more beneficial to wait until after an incident, wait for things to come back down to 0 before we start to approach what happened and have conversations about those A, B, and C's. Trying to deal with it in the moment is never going to work. But taking a step back and letting things de-escalate again, back to 0, is where we can start to have those meaningful conversations with our young people. So after an angry outburst, do we give a consequence or do we give a punishment? Do we give both? Are they the same thing? Are they different? Well, a punishment is designed to make you feel worse. Punishments were initially designed to deter a community. If you were caught stealing apples, you were put in the stocks and everyone would throw the rotten fruit at you. That was never there to help that individual get it right next time. It was there to frighten the rest of the community from committing that crime. Punishments generally are there to make you feel worse. And if you feel worse, you will behave worse. You'll behave in a more angry way if you feel worse. A consequence is there to teach you how to get it right next time. Consequences can help you learn the impact of your behaviour, how to unpick your own anger, and how to get it right next time. Everyone makes mistakes, and that can include angry outbursts. There's nothing wrong with being angry, but a consequence can teach you how to get that anger right next time. So protective consequence may be limiting contact with others to minimize the risk of harm. It might be increased adult support, it might be limited access to outdoors, until I know you are safe to go back again. It's not removing all pleasurable experiences from your child. It's the consequences that when you were in that environment, you were unsafe. So I'm not going to put you back in that exact same environment because what am I expecting to change? The protective element of a consequence is I'll take you out of that environment until I know you are safe to return. The other side of a consequence is the consequence to educate. So for example, If your child feels quite anxious at the park when someone asks for a turn on the swing, that anxiety may cause that secondary anger, and they push the child. The protective consequence is we don't go back to the park. I'm not taking you away from the park because you're naughty and you can't enjoy being outside. I'm protecting you from getting in that same situation again. The other side of that is the educational side. Instead of going to the park, we're going to practice responses when someone asks for a turn. I'm going to equip you with the language or the routine or something to do when you start to feel that anxiety. I'll teach you, how do I recognize when I start to feel anxious? What do I do if someone asks me for a turn, but I don't want to give them a turn? Instead of pushing them, I will use the time that we would normally be at the park to practice responses until I know that you are safe to return. The consequence is not to take away the pleasurable enjoyment. The consequence is I'm keeping you safe until I know you can return. Thank you very much for watching. This has been a short webinar on the language of anger. Please follow the link on screen or scan the QR code to fill out a short feedback form. Goodbye.